Where Alasan, over to you.
All right, yeah, okay. Great, we're going to start. My role here is just to introduce the session, and great to see that this morning we're all out there engaging, presenting, chats. Brilliant. I hope we're going to continue with it this afternoon. So as you are aware, this conference is organized by UCL, Greenwich University, with our amazing partners. I don't want to go through all names again since we did that this morning, but if you just join us, please look at the program and you can see all the names of the partners involved. Now, this session is going to focus on water in Africa. And if you don't know Africa, where it's located in the world, later the chair or facilitator, Sani, will tell you where it is located. Let me introduce your facilitator for this afternoon is Sani Baba. He has one of the shortest names, but the longest title. Sani Baba is from the Public Services International. I would say he's the boss for the African and Arab regions. So that's the short of the title. I'm not mentioning the official title, it's really long. So if you want to know about it, go on to PSI's website and you see who Sani Baba is. No, like Sani Baba is a man of few words and he gets things done. So in this session, if he's facilitating, he'll get things done and he will not say much. And he would expect you presenters also to speak to the script and not waste your time. So over to you, Sani. And I know Sani has been in water sector in the struggles for a very long time. He contributed to setting up a lot of initiatives in Africa against water privatization. That for sure I know. So he is capable of speaking hundreds of hours on this topic, but that's why we put him to facilitate so he doesn't speak. Okay, Sani, over to you.
Thank you, Comrade Al-Hassan, and for that very short and beautiful introduction. I'm really not going to say much because we have very eminent personalities who are really going to do justice to this particular topic. We are going to be discussing more about water campaigns in the region. And we have eminent speakers that are really going to do justice, like I mentioned. And but quickly, let me now start by introducing the people that are here with us. We have Brother Aketch, Oluwafemi. Oluwafemi, we all know him as the Executive Director of Corporate Accountability and Public Partnership Africa. He's been very much around and really very active and in Nigeria and even beyond Nigeria and globally. And of course, he is now trying to really expand his tentacles into other countries in Africa, collaboration with the trade union movement. That is PSI and also other trade union organizations within the region. Comrade Akinbode has a baby known as Water Our Right, which actually they established in Nigeria, and that has been doing a really massive campaign against water privatization, especially in Lagos and also other parts of the country. We also have Fatou Diouf. Fatou Diouf is working with Public Services International. She's bilingual. She speaks both French and English, and she's based in Dakar, Senegal. She has actually been doing a lot in PSI and also in water campaign. And her role actually joined the World Water Forum in Dakar, where she organized an alternative forum, is really very much fresh in our minds. And she is also going to be talking to us. We also have Sister Aderonke. She's an associate director responsible for the coordination of Water Our Right in Nigeria. And she has also been very active in this campaign in Nigeria and even beyond the shores of Nigeria, in Africa, also other parts of the globe. We also have a friend, a colleague, Comrade Younoussa Abossouka is a very familiar name. We have been working with him, especially against the water privatization in Cameroon. We all know about the Camps water and the end of privatization in Cameroon. She's been very active, been working with CAPPA, working with PSI, and also working with other organizations in the region. And he's also going to be sharing his experience with us. And finally, we have also Dr. Everline Aketch. She is the sub-regional secretary in charge of English-speaking East and West Africa. She's based in Uganda. She also has a very good experience on water privatization, tax justice, trade, and many other fields. So she's going to be talking to us. I am not sure if Professor Sofiri Joab-Peterside is very much around, but anytime she joins, we will do justice in introducing her so that she takes the floor. So comrades, I'm not going to take much of your time, but quickly, let me start with the big comrade, this most correct in the hall, and Comrade Akinbode to share with us his experience of fighting water privatization in Lagos, by extension, fighting World Bank, and then at the end of his conclusion, he will try also to give us the alternatives that they are preferring against water privatization in Nigeria and also other parts of Africa. Comrade Bode, you have 7 minutes, but I will also add 3 minutes if you do not really serve a very good meal to all the participants that are in this meeting. So Comrade Bode, please, over to you.
Thank you very much, Comrade Sani Baba, and thanks for putting up this wonderful webinar. I may not need up to my 7 or 10 minutes because I'm going to be very brief and speak to some of the topical issues on the water campaign in Nigeria and parts of Africa. Well, around 2014, we got information that the Lagos state government was about to sign an advisory contract with the International Financial Corporation, basically to advise it on how to privatize its water infrastructure. Now, Lagos is the commercial hub of Nigeria with about 21 million people, of which that 10%, less than 10% have access to water. So the crisis of water, it's very real with intermittent cases of waterborne related diseases in modern day Nigeria. But before 2014, we find out that the IFC, as far way back as 1988, 1999, has been advising Lagos State government on what it called the water sector reform, ultimately aimed at privatizing the Lagos water. And we dug into several other states in Nigeria, and we find that either one state or the other, in fact, about 80% of the states in Nigeria, like region, are owing the World Bank one debt or the other, or as a result of some so-called water reforms that never actually produce water, but debts on our country. We also look at, the factors that led to what can be called water crisis, as I said, in Lagos, aging pipeline, lack of budgetary allocation, but of course, inconsistency and anti-people policies, anti-labor laws, and the rest of them. And so we decided to organize because we were very sure that privatization was not going to be the answer to the water crisis in Lagos. We know for sure that privatization does not necessarily and will not promote universal access to water. We know that it could lead to water being priced, of course, beyond the reach of the people. And of course, we also know that water in itself is a right. And so we formed a coalition we called This is Lagos, Our Water, Our Right. Because we know that in Nigeria, Lagos is the heart of the country, is the commercial heartbeat of Nigeria. And if the water privatizers succeed in Lagos, they will certainly take over Nigeria. And of course, as we progress, if you take Nigeria, you take Africa. And what did we do? What we did was to build a movement of labor union, of NGOs like us, and of course, community people into that alliance. which began to challenge, what the state government was pulling out, what the World Bank was pulling out. And we organized a lot of mass action. We organized a lot of direct engagement with the states, and of course, the labor unions that were affiliates, PSI, Opta in Nigeria, were also organizing labor action. It's interesting to note that the governments, because we have succeeded, this campaign has survived about 3 governors, is that the governments never took our campaign lightly. We started under a guy called what's his name? The current minister for work, Raji Fashola, who was then very popular, that boasted that within months he was going to privatize the water infrastructure. But we mobilized and called people out, and he wasn't able to do that. Then we came under Akinbode, another pro-privatization governor, who actually privatized, the entire garbage clearing and delivery in Lagos, what eventually became a vision scam. Now, what I would like to stress is that if we're talking about shifting narratives, what we attempted to do was to bring back the narrative from the way the corporation were channeling it in Lagos and eventually in Nigeria, and then we go to Africa. What do I mean? The biggest point was that the issue of rights was not in their conversation. We had their master plan, and there are 3 critical elements of the privatization agenda, for instance, in Lagos, which is number 1, the access to water. The need. There is a dire need for water, number 1. Then Lagos is surrounded by water. So according to them, the raw material is there. And also that the people do have ability to pay. Yes, Lagosians are paying incredibly high for water because the public tap was not working. But when you look at what they have said, the issue of access, the issue of the human right to water was not on their card. And so we shifted that narrative from the pro-profit narrative into a pro-people narrative. I think that's essentially is what we should be looking at now as corporations around the world begin to again take over our continent, take over our resources. We should begin to reorganize and I reclaim power, because it's not that we want to shift power. The power residually belongs to the people. Now it's our responsibility to bring the people back to own the power that's originally theirs. One of the things that we faced during that campaign was that eventually we had to at least twice sit down with the Lagos State government about, is there a roadmap? Is there a solution to the Lagos water crisis? I know there was a time that a commissioner then, who happens to be a senator here now, called us to a meeting and said, look, you guys have been talking about no to privatization. What exactly is the solution to the Lagos water crisis? And I want to say that we were again fortunate to be able to pull together experts in PSI, with PSI actually playing critical role in that. And we produced a document that we call the Lagos Water Crisis, an Alternative Roadmap. And in that roadmap, we made a lot of recommendations. And part of the recommendation that we did was that there should be, the democratic control of our resources. African people should be allowed to channel the development that best suits them. For water, privatization does not suit African development. In Africa, water is sacred. Community controls and community protect their water infrastructure. And so it is very strange, it's un-African for us to hand over our water to transnationals, to aliens who does not know even our cultural rights and our cultural responsibility and our cultural attachment to our water infrastructure. We said that there should be improved labor practices within the water system. We also recommended, among others, plugging loopholes. And in some cases, of course, that the government must increase allocation democratically into the water sector within a public control water sector. That is what this campaign has always been about. And that campaign now has grown from where we started. It was incubated as a Lagos water campaign. We now made it a Nigerian campaign, and we have a water rights campaign in Nigeria that has similarly used the same model of labor, CSO, communities, participation to build a mass movement to resist privatization in Plateau, to resist in several other states in Nigeria. And of course, we're now growing onto the African region. I think it's what I can share, other than to say it has also been an exciting campaign for me. That's perfect,
Comrade Bode, for speaking. Just within 10 minutes, you started 11:37 and now it's 11:47. So that's really wonderful. And I don't know, the magic Al-Hassan is also playing. The education conference had 62, we maintained 62 up to the end, and now we have 65 participants. And now how we can also maintain these 65 participants up to the end. Well, that's really a very brief summary of all the issues that happened around our Water, Our Right campaign in Lagos that is now going beyond Lagos to other states in the country and also to about 10 countries, I know, in Africa. That's really very wonderful. And Comrade Bode really mentioned some very clear points about the alternatives, democratization of our water, our resources. And then privatization is alien. It's a very, very new thing in Africa. And really, so we are ready to resist any form of privatization, be it in water, in education, or in energy, and also in health. So thank you very much, Comrade Bode. We'll really come back to you to make comments or answer questions. And I will now quickly go to Fatou. I also want to apologize for addressing Professor Sofiri as a he, she. Actually, my attention was drawn is a he, not a she. So I'm really very much sorry about that. Anytime we have the Prof around, we'll definitely take the floor so that he can also share some of his experiences with us. Let me now quickly take Sister Fatou Diouf, our PSI project coordinator in charge of French-speaking countries, Africa, who is also based in Dakar, Senegal. So, Sister Fatou, please, you have the floor to speak for 7 minutes. Then, but you at liberty to go beyond 7 minutes to 10 minutes. So, please, the floor is yours, Sister Fatou.
Thank you very much, Brother Sani. Thank you to all the organizers for these wonderful sessions. We are glad to be there since the beginning. So I just want to ask to all the English speakers to go to the interpretation channel and change it, because I will speak in I will speak in French. My presentation will be in French. Thank you. Mes frères et sœurs, camarades, bonjour, bienvenue dans cette session qui va parler de l'eau et de la privatisation de l'eau en Afrique, qui est une question essentielle parce que nous voyons depuis très très longtemps que de plus en plus de nos ressources, particulièrement l'eau, est de plus en plus privatisée sous l'influence des institutions monétaires internationales comme le FMI, la Banque mondiale. Les gouvernants tentent de privatiser notre ressource, l'eau, sous différents prétextes. Dans ma présentation, je vais plus parler de l'impact de la privatisation de l'eau sur les travailleurs et comment les syndicats devraient s'organiser pour lutter contre cette privatisation. Comme l'a dit Baudet, la lutte contre la privatisation de l'eau est une nécessité partout où l'eau est privatisée. Les populations doivent s'organiser pour lutter contre cette privatisation parce qu'il y a énormément de méfaits. Alors, en ce qui concerne, dans ces privatisations, on voit souvent les gouvernements et les institutions financières mondiales défendre la privatisation comme étant la meilleure des pratiques et la pratique qui permet de rationaliser les dépenses publiques. Ce que nous savons, bien sûr que c'est faux. Durant la période pré-privatisation, c'est-à-dire juste avant de signer les accords, vous allez voir des campagnes de communication où on va vous parler de meilleure gestion de ressources de l'eau, où on va vous parler on va vous dire il n'y aura plus de coupure d'eau, vous aurez de l'eau en quantité et en qualité. Et pour ceux qui vivent dans des villes où l'eau est privatisée, vous voyez que c'est totalement faux. Si je prends l'exemple du Sénégal, chez nous, notre eau est privatisée depuis 1996 jusqu'à maintenant. On a eu différents concessionnaires. En 2020, l'État a fait une concession de 15 ans à l'entreprise française Suez. Et depuis 2020, les Sénégalais qui sont dans le groupe pourront vérifier ce que je dis. Nous n'avons pas d'eau en zone urbaine, nous n'avons pas d'eau en qualité, nous n'avons pas d'eau en quantité. Et ceux qui ont les moyens, ils ne boivent pas l'eau qui vient du robinet. Ils achètent de l'eau minérale pour pouvoir donner ça à leur famille parce que l'eau qui vient du robinet n'est pas propre. En milieu rural, c'est encore pire. L'eau qui était gérée par les communautés pendant des années et depuis 2018 aussi privatisée. Et c'est très difficilement supportable par les communautés rurales. Alors, les entreprises privées, les entreprises qui viennent privatiser l'eau, les États, les institutions financières promettent avant de venir de meilleures conditions de travail pour les employés. Ils promettent des statuts meilleurs, des grades meilleurs. Mais pour ceux qui sont actuellement dans ces milieux, vous voyez que c'est totalement faux. Je vais ici citer deux cas. D'abord, il y a la nouvelle concession de l'eau, comme je viens de le dire. La nouvelle concession de gestion de l'eau en milieu urbain au Sénégal à Suez pour 15 ans et l'ancienne concession de gestion d'eau à la compagnie marocaine CDE pendant 10 ans au Cameroun. La différence qu'il y a un peu entre le Cameroun et le Sénégal, c'est que le Sénégal est toujours sous privatisation et qu'au Cameroun, la privatisation a cessé depuis quelques années. Alors, ce qu'on a remarqué dans ces deux compagnies, la CNO pour le Sénégal et l'ancienne CDE pour le Cameroun, c'est qu'il y avait beaucoup de cumul de postes. Et les postes vacants n'étaient jamais remplacés. C'était les mêmes personnes. Une même personne, on pouvait lui donner 2 ou 3 tâches à faire en plus de son boulot. Certains avantages qui étaient acquis par les syndicats ont été perdus. Il y a de plus en plus de personnel à temps partiel. Et quand on parle de personnel à temps partiel, on parle de limitation de la liberté d'association. Parce que ces gens n'ont pas le droit, entre guillemets, de se syndiquer. Parce que quand ils se syndiquent, ils reçoivent des menaces de la direction générale, de la direction des ressources humaines. Arrêtez de vous syndiquer, quittez le syndicat, sinon votre contrat ne sera pas renouvelé. Du coup, on a un taux de syndicalisation très, très, très faible dans ces entreprises. Et quand on a un taux de syndicalisation, excuse me? Can I continue? Je peux continuer?
Yeah, go ahead. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. L'entreprise devient très forte et impose beaucoup de contraintes aux travailleurs. On a aussi une différence inexpliquée de salaire entre les expatriés et les travailleurs locaux. Un exemple, et ça ne s'explique pas, une différence inexpliquée. L'exemple type est le Sénégal. Actuellement, à la CNO, nous avons beaucoup d'expatriés qui viennent de France pour, soi-disant, apporter une certaine expertise. Mais ce qu'on oublie de préciser à la population, c'est qu'en fait, juste avant que la CNO ne vienne au Sénégal, avant 2020, et pendant 4 ou 5 ans, l'entreprise SDE, qui est une filiale de Eranov, a été gérée à 100% par un personnel sénégalais. 100% de Sénégalais ont géré l'entreprise. Et à cette période, on avait de l'eau. On n'avait certes pas, c'était certes pas ce qu'on souhaite, mais on avait de l'eau. Maintenant, en 2020, c'est pour ça que beaucoup se sont battus pour qu'il n'y ait pas de privatisation, parce qu'on avait le personnel qualifié pour gérer l'entreprise. Les ressources pour financer l'entreprise sont données via la SONES, qui est la Société Patrimoine, via des prêts que les Sénégalais payent avec leurs impôts. Donc, il n'y avait aucune logique à privatiser cette entreprise-là. Mais pour des besoins politico-politiciens et beaucoup de corruption, nos gouvernements ont décidé de privatiser la société d'eau pour 15 ans encore. Alors, dans les entreprises, nous avons beaucoup de syndicats jaunes, c'est-à-dire des syndicats corrompus que les employeurs créent, que ce soit à la SDE ou à Camwater, à la CDE à l'époque. Et ces syndicats jaunes ne viennent que pour contredire tout ce que les syndicats, les vrais, font pour les travailleurs. Alors, en milieu rural, comme je le disais, c'est pire parce que les travailleurs des forages sont simplement renvoyés et remplacés par de nouveaux travailleurs sans aucune explication, sans aucun préavis, ni rien du tout. Ils sont juste renvoyés. Alors, tout ça pour dire que la privatisation de l'eau n'a que des conséquences négatives, et pour les travailleurs et pour la population, et ça partout, particulièrement en Afrique. Et les populations sont capables, en milieu rural, de gérer leur eau. Ils l'ont prouvé dans beaucoup de communautés. En milieu urbain, avec une bonne gestion, le gouvernement est capable de financer la gestion de l'eau. Ils sont capables et il y a beaucoup de preuves, comme Bodé l'a dit tout à l'heure, beaucoup de preuves montrent qu'on est capable de financer les services publics tels que l'eau. Donc, il n'y a aucune importance à privatiser l'eau. À 100%, ce n'est que négatif. C'est une ressource qui nous appartient, et nous devons nous battre pour que cette ressource puisse être gérée de façon publique. Alors, la prochaine fois que vous entendrez les institutions monétaires internationales ou le gouvernement dire que la privatisation, c'est pour notre bien à tous, sachez que c'est faux et préparez-vous à vous battre ardemment. C'est le meilleur legs qu'on peut laisser aux générations futures de notre part. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatou. You have spoken very well and within time. I wanted to add you a few minutes because the Prof is not here, so we can really take advantage of this to add a few more minutes to each speaker. But all the same, you have spoken very well. Your case in Senegal is different. You are fighting very strong multinationals in the privatizing water, Suez and Biola, who have now merged. So it's really not going to be easy for you fighting Suez, Biola, and then of course at the same time World Bank. And you need to get some also experiences from Bode and Younoussa, who are both in Nigeria and Cameroon, to also assist you. I know you're already working in Cameroon, and you're also helping in the fight against the return of privatization in actually this sector. And there's also a request from the chat box to share your addresses, email addresses, and that I think will be handled better by Al Hassan and Vera who have the contact of all the speakers and participants. So I think that will be taken care of by the secretariat of this conference. So comrades, Fatou, thank you very much. I will come back to you for comments and probably some responses to the questions that are likely to be asked. Yeah, I can see Bode has already provided his own, so we are expecting more from colleagues. Now, I can see Aderonke, we call her Ronke, is very much around. She's a very strong campaigner, a senior advocate of Nigeria, but not in the law, in fighting against water privatization. And she is an associate director, like I mentioned, responsible for the coordination of our water right campaign in Nigeria and also in Africa. So, Sister Ronke, if you are very much around, I think you can now take the floor and talk to us about the coalition you have really formed in Nigeria and other parts of the country. And I know specifically you are also in about 10 countries in Africa where we are trying to really replicate same of what you did in Lagos. So Ronke, over to you.
Thank you so much, Comrade Sani Baba. And thank you very much, esteemed comrades, colleagues, and friends on the call. So I'll just go straight to what I'm supposed to share. Thanks to every comrade that has shared fantastic backgrounds about the situation of water in their countries and also the threat of privatization. So if I may, I'll just quickly share something that I took time also to prepare for this, which will also speak directly to what we are here to talk about. So I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, perfect. We can see it.
Sure.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So since my work is to talk directly to what we are doing as our Water, Our Right Africa coalition, or call it movement, because that is what it has actually really become. It has metamorphosed into a movement. And this movement is not outside of everything that all our comrades have shared, from comrade in Nigeria, Comrade Bode, Oluwafemi, who also will work in the same organization, Comrade Fatou, Diouf in Senegal, and of course in Francophone Africa, Younoussa also in Cameroon, Dr. Everline Aketch also in Eastern Africa. How did we get here? We got here because we saw a really huge problem and something that we are all, that applies to us, maybe not equally, but in different dimensions also. Our Water, Our Right Africa Coalition is a movement which is also a diverse network of civil society, labor organizations across all regions or sub-regions of Africa. And what are we doing? We are building people power and advancing the human right to water in the face of growing privatization threats on the continent of Africa. Also, the coalition recognizes privatization as one of the biggest threats at the moment in Africa to the realization of the human right to water on this continent as well. And what we are calling for is transparency, accountability in public water infrastructure management and everything that has to do with public water. So talking about privatization, which is the core of what our Water, Our Right is out to campaign against. Water privatization has already failed in Africa, and it has failed Africans. And I had to put this here just to show that sometimes when we also look at the issue of privatization, some of the corporations try to make it look like, oh, it's alien to us and it's the panacea, is the solution to our problems of water access, to water availability, affordability in Africa. But here I am to say it is not so. It's indeed a lie, because privatization has also been tested or tried in some countries of Africa, and we have seen the failure of it. It has totally failed. And when I talk about the failure, I'm going to look at some specific examples of countries where privatization has been tried and it has failed. In Tanzania, for instance, let's go. In Tanzania, which is the site of the one of the most notorious, in fact, privatization failures in the recent decades, we see the scheme that was backed by the World Bank IMF, UK government, among others, including, we see the failure that came from that, even though all these international financial institutions threw money into it and backed it up with all they had. We saw that there was still exponential failure because there was increase in water prices. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to quote here a report that was done by the World Bank Group itself. And that report was published in 2005. And I'm quoting, it says, the primary assumption on the part of almost all involved, this now talking about the time they started the project of privatization in Tanzania, certainly from the donor side, was that it would be very hard, if not impossible, for the private operator to perform worse than the public authority. This was them then thinking that the private sector would do better than what the public was doing. But is that what happened? That's not what happened. The fact is that private provision of water service has proven even more problematic, world over, and especially in Africa. And I'm quoting the World Bank itself. So one would think that this is enough for them to think, okay, lesson learned, let's back out. But no, in spite of this, the World Bank has continued to promote the model across the continent of Africa and around the world in nearly 2 decades now since that abysmal failure. So I'm going to move quickly. I won't talk too much about this. I'll just speak to them because I kind of spotlighted situations across countries of Africa, including Gabon. In Gabon, where the World Bank's promotion of the Gabonese privatization as a success is in stark contrast to the reality of its failures, which we all see. Government officials and the public detailed widespread supply cuts. That was at the time that there was privatization in Gabon, which the IFIs also paraded as though is the success story, the ultimate success story in Africa. But we know that's not true because these are the testimonials that we're taking. We saw that there was widespread supply cuts, bill irregularities, environmental hazards, and unkept commitment from the private operators themselves. So these are some of the testimonials that came at the heel of privatization in Gabon. The failures were underscored by events including typhoid outbreak and all other water-related diseases that happened or that broke out, as a matter of fact, in Gabon, especially in the capital city where privatization was situated, which was like the seat of privatization. Cameroon, I won't belabor the issue because I'm sure my comrade Younoussa also said a lot even before I joined. But then the Cameroonians have also seen that privatization is not the way out and is not a solution, not in their country or not in any part of Africa. So I'm just going to take the last paragraph here in my presentation, which says the civil society and labor in Cameroon have continued to urge the state to remember the failures of the previous experience which they had with privatization and avoid following the same path again, which is looking imminent now. But then we believe that with the support of all and then continued solidarity, it wouldn't succeed. In Ghana, the story is also not far from what is happening in the rest of Africa, where in fact, privatization showed its absolute failure. And because of that, they had to also deprivatize. And then the problems that have come to be are also different in coloration to what it was earlier. But then there's still likely or there's threats in Ghana still, even of privatization. But today, the Ghanaian water sector faces new challenges, as I said, and many still driven by corporations and their institutional backers. So this is to say that even though the privatization happened in Ghana, the corporation has not removed its claws from that country. And through the promotion of a prepaid water scheme in Ghana, the World Bank and its partners, including the UK government, have put their approach to water access in Ghana on full display under the heading of no payment, no water. And this is in direct contrast or in sharp contrary, in a spirit of contrast to the human right to water, which has also been declared by the United Nations General Assembly. That was in 2010. So one would imagine that by now, the human right to water should be part and parcel of policies and laws of government, but the contrast is still the case also. Additionally, in Ghana, I have mentioned here that the public utility purchases water from a privatized desalination plant for what labor representatives have described as outrageous cost. One of the organizers of this conference, the PSI, has done an extensive report on this as well, and the voices are uniform. It's very outrageous what is happening in Ghana, because also the corporations are still behind it, and the public utility is still purchasing water from the privatized desalination plants, which is also abysmal. In Kenya, I wouldn't belabor the issue also, because our comrade is here, Comrade Everline also, and I'm sure she is doing justice to the issue in Kenya and also in Uganda. So I won't say much about Uganda as well. But in Mozambique, the story is also not different. But I will go to the most recent situation, which is that in May in 2021, the threat of re-privatization emerged after the cabinet approved a wide sweeping privatization scheme that's in Mozambique that would cover 19 large urban areas, potentially impacting 7 million Mozambicans. This plan will create 4 regional utilities, and this is the danger, currently owned by the state through FIPAG, with an aim to sell up to 49% of their equity to the private sector in the coming years. That is really outrageous and abysmal. So this plan is with the USAID to contract a panel of international experts, and that's why I put it in quote as well, for technical assistance in an effort to make the utilities as attractive and efficient as possible ahead of the looming privatization. In Nigeria, I would also not really belabor the issue, because I'm sure my comrade Akinbode has also done justice to that. Senegal also, Comrade Fatou has done justice. Uganda, Comrade Everline has done justice. So what I will just move quickly to, which is also the concluding part of my presentation, is that all of these issues that I have highlighted in this presentation, and all of the challenges of the threat of water privatization have made us to come to one realization or conclusion: the fact that Africa is being exploited to be the baby of the privatization agenda, which will not work. And why will it not work? Because we need to have a cohesive struggle. And if it's cohesive, it means also that we have to take the fight from all the struggles of the past and then harmonize. And that is the essence of the struggle that we are seeing being birthed, or the movements, you know. So there's no denying that movements have come ahead of now, but then all that is also a success story, because at the end of the day, it shows that we can only build on foundations that have been laid. So in the face of this threat to the human right to water, there's a growing movement of civil society and labor, joining also the academia. The academia is also doing a great job, because we have a huge component of research as part of this movement that are growing to reject privatization and chart a more just way forward. This is also evidenced by over 300 cases of deprivatization, which sometimes also we refer to as remunicipalization or renationalization, depending on the structure of each country that is involved in the water sector in the last 2 decades. So building on the momentum of these movements and this cohesion, we are rejuvenating the struggle in the defense of human right to water, and spurred by the urgency of the converging public health, environmental, and economic crisis which we face today. So the Our Water, Our Right Africa Coalition was born. And here is just seeing examples of things that have been done, from street protests to actual taking the fight to the doors of the corporations, to the government, and then system engagement, community engagement also, to be able to showcase truly the realities on ground, and then engaging systems with it in forms of laws and policies. So these are just pictures from Nigeria to Cameroon to Kenya to Uganda to Mozambique to Ghana and all other countries where the movement is booming strong. And what are the demands of this movement? So as much as we are in different countries of Africa, our demands are also focused and single-minded. So we have these demands channeled at 3 broad areas. The first one is towards the African states themselves. What should the government of Africa be doing? What should our respective and individual institutions and sectors of government be doing, public sector? Then the second one, the demand is channeled to regional intergovernmental bodies. So as Africa, there are bodies that bind us, under which umbrella we say we are Africans and we push agendas forward. Those bodies, they need to be responsible, and we have demands for them. And finally, last but not least in any way at all, is the international financial institutions and multilateral or bilateral development agencies. And that's why I'm really excited about the angle that my comrade, Sister Fatou, took while talking about the struggle also in Senegal and how we need to, all these struggles are multifaceted and the IFIs are playing a huge role. So for the African states, we have a few demands. Number one is definitely to reject all forms of corporate control of water and privatization of water services, including anything paraded as public-private partnership, because also these things have dimensions and they have schematics around them, which can be really dangerous. Then the governments of Africa or African states also should rise to their obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill the human right to water for all people by prioritizing robust public investment as opposed to commodifying water and making it an issue of survival of the fittest, or whoever has the most can afford the most water and then afford to be alive. Then the third one is to respect and protect the livelihood of workers, which is very important by ensuring safe working conditions and protecting them also from the retribution of raising complaints and investment in salaries and pensions reflective of the public service that these workers undertake every day, because we know the danger also that comes with privatizing the public sector. There's going to be most likely layoffs and workers are going to suffer the most for it. And that's one of the reasons that the labor is also a huge part of this movement. Also, we are urging African states to resist the pressure from IFIs to privatize water in their countries or in our respective countries. And for the regional intergovernmental bodies, and by regional intergovernmental bodies, I'm speaking about African Union, we are speaking about the Economic Community of West African States, as ECOWAS, we are speaking also about the Economic Community of Central African States, Eastern African Community, Southern African Development Community, and so on. And what are we asking them to do? It's not so hard. It's to foster regional solidarity, which is really important. And then when the need arises, they have to intervene in the humaneness and the issue of human right to water, which is a threat in most of their countries that are represented under these bodies. And for the international financial institutions and their replicas, our message is very simple and straightforward, is to stop pushing water privatization agenda, commercialization, and financialization on African states. It's just really appalling when you see that it's always an issue of profit. And then that's why we mentioned earlier that African states should resist this. But then even IFIs should stop making it a criteria for development agenda to be set in African countries. And then finally, we have learned lessons, in our pursuit of human right to water, and then in resisting threats of privatization. But perhaps some of our greatest lessons will just be two that I highlighted here. One is that when we stick together, our bond is harder to break. And we have seen that play out in this movement, in our struggle so far, from the foundational struggle, from people that have come before us, and even where we are now. When we stick together, our bond is harder to break. And when we fight, we win. And we are hoping to win this one as well. And thank you very much, comrade, for the time given to me. I hope I didn't overshoot. Thank you all.
Thank you, Ronke. That's a very wonderful, comprehensive presentation. And really, finally. And thank you very much. You have really taken us round on this very great journey. And I'm happy that our comrades from Southern Africa are also part of this conference. As Sister Sandra Van Niekerk is really here. And so that angle of Mozambique is one area that also sounds very, very interesting. And we're really going to follow up on that to make sure that we know exactly what is going on in that country. Thank you very much for this comprehensive presentation. And of course, the concluding part of it, and I hope is going to be fully captured by our rapporteurs. And I know Comrade Hassan is there shaking now because you are really virtually touched on what he did in Ghana, and that also is part of his success stories, fighting privatization and sending alcohol evidence back home to Netherlands. And so that's really very interesting. So comrades, I am not being deceived by the time given to us, and I assume we have almost 40 minutes to end. If I'm wrong, please Vera and Alhassan correct me. So that we can now quickly go to Comrade Younoussa Abossouka. Younoussa is also with the Africa Center for Advocacy in Cameroon. Is a man fully on ground who has been doing a very good job with CAPPA and the PSI, and also the traditional institutional faith groups, and actually in Cameroon to fight against water privatization, not only fighting against it, fighting against any re-entry into Cameroon, either through the back door or through whatever means to continue with this water privatization in the country. So Comrade Younoussa Abossouka, I know you're also a very good speaker, so you have 10 minutes to speak, and I can allow you if you are 2 to 3 minutes. So please, Comrade Younoussa, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Comrade Sani Baba. Good afternoon to everyone. Please, I would like to invite all participants to turn their interpretation in English because I will be speaking in French. And although my presentation, my PowerPoint presentation will be in English. So yeah, so I will share my screen to start my presentation. Is it clear for everyone, please?
Yeah, it's fine. It's fine.
Well, thank you. Merci aux camarades Sani Baba et merci à tous les précédents panélistes d'avoir présenté avant nous et d'avoir déjà présenté la majeure partie des informations que je vais partager avec les participants cet après-midi. Ok, ma présentation va se focaliser sur la campagne contre la privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun, dont il est question de partager notre expérience au niveau du Cameroun. Le contenu de ma présentation est le suivant. Il est d'abord question de parler de l'accès à l'eau au Cameroun et essayer de répondre à la question de savoir si c'est un droit humain. Et puis, il y aura une présentation brève sur la privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun, c'est-à-dire comment ça a commencé et jusqu'où nous en sommes aujourd'hui. Puis les impacts de la privatisation et le coût de la renationalisation du secteur de l'eau au Cameroun. Et ensuite, je vais suivre ma présentation avec la campagne qu'on a eu à initier au niveau du Cameroun pour lutter contre une autre privatisation du secteur de l'eau. Ensuite, les leçons apprises et enfin, les pistes à suivre dans ce sens. Il est important de rappeler dans un premier temps que l'eau n'a pas de frontières. Ceci dit, l'eau n'appartient à personne. Donc, on ne peut pas privatiser l'eau. C'est un bien public qui appartient au secteur public. Ça, c'est un point très important qu'il faut d'abord mentionner. Ceci dit, au niveau du Cameroun, il y a environ 66% de la population qui a accès à une eau potable et 34% n'en ont pas accès, ce qui est un cas très énorme. Par ailleurs, en 2010, l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies a adopté une résolution selon laquelle l'accès à l'eau est un droit humain, c'est-à-dire qui, tout citoyen, malgré sa position géographique, malgré son statut social, a droit à l'eau. Et c'est à l'État qui revient l'obligation de fournir l'eau à ses citoyens. Par ailleurs, on constate que la Constitution du Cameroun ne reconnaît pas l'accès à l'eau comme un droit humain, ce qui ouvre la porte au secteur privé, aux entreprises privées de pouvoir gérer le secteur de l'eau et de s'impliquer dans la gestion de l'eau. Et on sait que quand le secteur privé gère l'eau, on a affaire à la privatisation, à l'exclusion, à la marginalisation des communautés. Raison pour laquelle il est important que nos États africains puissent reconnaître l'accès à l'eau au niveau de la Constitution. Donc, ça doit être un droit constitutionnel dans nos États africains. Le Kenya l'a adopté en 2010 également, en reconnaissant l'accès à l'eau et à l'assainissement comme un droit humain. Nous pensons que c'est un très bon exemple que beaucoup d'États africains doivent également suivre en reconnaissant l'accès à l'eau comme un droit humain, ce qui va constituer également une autre barrière au secteur privé et qui va permettre à ce que le secteur public puisse gérer de manière efficace l'eau dans nos différents pays. Cependant, il est important de rappeler la privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun. Comment ça s'est passé? Ça a commencé où et où en sommes-nous aujourd'hui? La privatisation de l'eau a commencé autour des années 91 avec l'ajustement structurel promue par le Fonds monétaire international, mais cette tentation a échoué. Puis, en 2005, il y a eu la création de la CANWATA afin de faciliter la venue des partenaires privés, afin de faciliter la privatisation de l'eau. Ce processus donc a abouti en 2008 précisément, où le chef de l'État a annoncé la privatisation du secteur de l'eau au Cameroun à un consortium marocain pour un contrat de 10 ans. Et à ce point, il est important de rappeler que quand le consortium marocain prenait le secteur de l'eau ou le secteur privé, ils ont promu le message qu'ils vont améliorer les infrastructures, ils vont améliorer la qualité de l'eau, ils vont améliorer l'employabilité dans le secteur de l'eau, ils vont améliorer la distribution dans les zones rurales de l'eau. Mais 10 ans plus tard, on s'est rendu compte que ceci n'était que des purs mensonges. Rien de cela ne s'est réalisé. Au contraire, on a eu une dégradation dans le secteur de distribution de l'eau au Cameroun. C'est ainsi qu'en 2018, l'État du Cameroun décide donc de mettre fin à la privatisation du fait des impacts négatifs sur la population en renationalisant le secteur de l'eau. Et cette expérience de 2018 au Cameroun a inspiré les pays voisins comme le Gabon, qui a également décidé de renationaliser son secteur de l'eau en 2018 également, après 20 ans de gestion par une entreprise privée, c'est-à-dire par Veolia qui gérait l'eau au Gabon pendant 20 ans. Et après 20 années de gestion, le Gabon a également, en 2018, décidé de renationaliser son secteur de l'eau. C'est une preuve que le secteur privé a toujours échoué partout où elle passe. Il est important de maintenir l'eau dans le secteur public. Ça, c'est une preuve palpable et que nous devons capitaliser sur cela. Et en tant que les moteurs ou bien les agents, les structures qui promettent la privatisation de l'eau, nous avons le Fonds monétaire international, nous avons la Banque mondiale, l'Agence française de développement, la Banque africaine de développement, qui sont des structures, particulièrement au niveau africain, qui essaient de pousser l'agenda de la privatisation et forcer nos États à privatiser le secteur de l'eau. Quels ont été donc les impacts de la privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun? Pendant les 10 années de la privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun, on a entre autres eu l'augmentation des prix, la malgouvernance, le manque de transparence, l'exclusion des populations et la discrimination au niveau du statut social. Les communautés qui n'avaient pas assez de moyens étaient exclues de la distribution de l'eau, ce qui est un danger palpable de la privatisation de l'eau. Plus important, il y a eu la perte des emplois. Fatou a présenté tout à l'heure l'impact des secteurs privés sur le secteur de l'employabilité. Quand le secteur privé vient, on enregistre toujours la baisse au niveau des emplois dans le secteur, ce qui a également un impact négatif dans la société. De plus, il y a eu les coûts que l'État du Cameroun a dû payer par rapport à la renationalisation du secteur de l'eau, qui a été estimé à autour de 19 millions de dollars américains. Ce qui montre que si l'État n'avait pas privatisé l'eau, si l'eau était restée dans le secteur public, cet argent dépensé lors de la renationalisation du secteur de l'eau pourrait être utilisé pour augmenter les infrastructures, pour améliorer la qualité de distribution, pour améliorer la qualité de vie des populations. Et ceci prouve que seul le secteur public a la volonté et la capacité de distribuer de manière équitable l'eau à la population et à tout temps et à toute heure. Et la même chose également s'est passée au Gabon, qui est un pays voisin, où, après le départ de Veolia, ils ont réclamé la somme de 65 milliards de francs CFA à l'État gabonais après la rupture de leur contrat. C'est pour dire que la meilleure façon de gérer l'eau, c'est de ne pas privatiser l'eau. Il est important que cette gestion soit maintenue dans le secteur public. Au Cameroun, en ce moment, il est important de rappeler qu'il y a les menaces de la privatisation. Sorry? Hello? Is it a problem? Sorry, please. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, je disais qu'en ce moment, il y a encore les menaces qui pèsent sur le Cameroun en termes de privatisation du secteur de l'eau. Plus récemment, on a eu avec la fusion entre Veolia et Suez, qui est une des multinationales qui sont présentes au Cameroun, qui ont des contrats et qui essaient toujours de pousser afin de reprendre la gestion de l'eau au Cameroun. Nous avons également Bayowata, qui est une entreprise privée britannique qui est présente au Cameroun, qui essaie toujours de reprendre ce secteur de l'eau. Et à cet effet, nous sommes organisés donc depuis 2018 à travers une campagne pour barrer la route au secteur privé. Quelles sont les stratégies qu'on a eu à utiliser pour contrer l'agenda de la privatisation au Cameroun jusqu'à présent? Il est important, Bodé l'a mentionné, la campagne du Nigeria, Our Right Campaign au Nigeria, qui était très important pour nous parce qu'on a vu leurs expériences, on a vu comment ils ont mené leur campagne au Nigeria. On s'est inspiré de cette expérience et on s'est dit comment est-ce qu'on peut répliquer cela au Cameroun. Étant donné qu'eux, ils ont réussi à empêcher la privatisation de l'eau à Lagos, on s'est dit, nous également, on peut empêcher une autre privatisation de l'eau au Cameroun. Comment est-ce qu'on peut le faire? On s'est inspiré de l'expérience du Nigeria et on a essayé de comprendre notre contexte local au niveau du Cameroun, le contexte sociopolitique du Cameroun, comment ça marche au Cameroun, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire au Cameroun, qu'est-ce qu'on ne peut pas faire au Cameroun. Par exemple, au Nigeria, il y a eu les manifestations dans la rue, chose qu'au Cameroun, c'est impossible en ce moment de manifester dans la rue. Alors, on a utilisé d'autres techniques pour faire entendre notre voix, pour faire passer nos messages et pour barrer la route au secteur privé. C'est ainsi qu'en 2019, on a initié un mouvement Keep Water in Public Hands et qui avait pour but de maintenir l'eau dans le secteur public et que l'eau doit être gérée par le secteur public. On a d'abord essayé de construire nos messages en incluant tout le monde, en rassemblant tout le monde autour de notre campagne, parce que l'accès à l'eau est un problème pour tout le monde. Donc, il fallait que tout le monde se sente concerné dans notre campagne, dans notre lutte, afin qu'elle puisse avoir une résonance. Nous avons également construit des alliances et des partenariats avec les syndicalistes, les médias, les leaders communautaires, la société civile et également les chercheurs qui sont également des facteurs clés dans la réussite d'une campagne parce qu'ils nous ont permis d'avoir des informations, des données capitales pour pouvoir communiquer avec la population, pour pouvoir échanger avec les leaders, pour pouvoir véhiculer le message. Et ensuite, il y a eu l'utilisation des réseaux sociaux et des médias en ligne au niveau national et international. Ce point également est très important dans la mesure où, au niveau du Cameroun, il est difficile de se faire entendre. Il est important donc que les médias internationaux puissent relayer notre campagne afin que le pouvoir en place, les autorités du pays, puissent comprendre le mouvement d'humeur de la population et prendre des actions dans ce sens. C'est ainsi qu'on a impliqué les partenaires et les médias internationaux à pouvoir relayer nos messages, les campagnes, nos initiatives, et ça a été un grand succès. Et grâce à cette campagne, on a réussi à amener le gouvernement camerounais à investir en 2020 environ 4,7 millions de dollars pour la réhabilitation, l'expansion des infrastructures dans le secteur de l'eau au niveau national. Quelles sont donc les leçons qu'on a eu à prendre autour de cette campagne? On a compris que mener une campagne contre la privatisation de l'eau, il est important de comprendre le contexte local dans lequel nous travaillons. Il est important de comprendre le contexte politique, parce que ce qui peut se faire au Nigeria ou au Gabon ne peut pas forcément se faire au Cameroun. Donc, il est important de comprendre le contexte local avant d'implémenter une campagne. On a également compris que seul le secteur public peut améliorer la distribution de l'eau au niveau rural et urbain, sans discrimination, sans exclusion et en prenant toutes les couches de la société en compte, en ne laissant personne de côté. Et grâce à cette campagne, on a également pu amener le gouvernement à enlever les taxes sur les consommations d'eau de moins de 20 mètres cubes, ce qui est un succès très important dans la campagne que nous avions eu à mener. On a également compris que la lutte contre la privatisation nécessite la construction des alliances, des partenariats avec le secteur public, avec les unions, avec les communautés, avec les organisations nationales et internationales au niveau régional, local et international. Et l'une autre leçon apprise est que la meilleure façon d'éviter les coûts et les impacts négatifs de la privatisation de l'eau, c'est de ne pas privatiser du tout. Il ne faut pas privatiser l'eau. Le secteur public a les capacités, a les compétences nécessaires afin de pouvoir améliorer en qualité et en quantité l'accès à l'eau aux populations. Et enfin, nous disons que quand le secteur public est privatisé, la connaissance et les compétences locales sont également privatisées. Et quand il y a renationalisation, c'est difficile de récupérer ces compétences. Donc, il ne faut pas privatiser l'eau. Quelles sont les pistes à suivre? Nous disons qu'il est important d'augmenter la coopération et le partage des connaissances entre le secteur public et à travers les différents pays. Donc, les secteurs publics doivent coopérer de plus en plus afin de partager les expériences et les connaissances afin d'améliorer la qualité de services dans le secteur de l'eau, mais également de contrer la route au secteur privé. Nous disons également qu'il est important de former les journalistes à relayer l'information sur la privatisation, sur les impacts négatifs de la privatisation de l'eau. Il est important que nos journalistes puissent relayer cela de manière constante et pousser l'agenda du secteur public et pousser l'agenda en disant que oui, le secteur public a les moyens, a les capacités, il faut qu'on les encourage dans ce sens. Il est également important de continuer à informer la population et les sensibiliser sur les impacts négatifs de la privatisation. Il est important d'informer nos leaders qui nous dirigent. Parfois, ceux qui dirigent le secteur de l'eau ne sont pas au courant de ces impacts. Il est important de les sensibiliser également, de les prendre en compte en les sensibilisant sur les méfaits de la privatisation. Et enfin, nous disons que nous avons des alternatives à la privatisation. Nous disons non à la privatisation, mais nous avons des alternatives. Il y a un rapport publié par le Corporate Accountability and Public Participation Africa, qui dit Africa Must Rise and Resist to Water Privatization, qui a été publié en 2021, qui spécifie, dans ce rapport, il y a toutes les alternatives qu'on doit mettre sur pied pour le secteur public, pour la gestion de l'eau dans le secteur public, pour améliorer la qualité des services du secteur public. Parce qu'on peut le faire, on a les connaissances, on a les compétences et on a les moyens. Merci pour votre attention et je suis disposé à répondre aux questions juste après cette présentation. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, Comrade Younoussa, and for this wonderful presentation. You have really done justice. And we are going to have it also downloaded in the chat box so that those interested can really have it in their folder. I've seen some requests from Palestine that we want to do this kind of campaign, that Palestinians are most willing to actually accept this campaign. We can also extend it to other countries in the Arab sub-region. And I'm happy. Hello? Can we please mute the others? Yeah, I think I thank you very sincerely for this presentation, because you are very sincere, especially in the areas of protests and strikes in Cameroon, and that are not likely to be very possible of like what is happening in Ghana or what is happening in Nigeria. It's not going to be easy to really have a protest on the streets of Cameroon because of the kind of government that is there. But yes, I agree with you. There are also threats hovering on the air there. And very many privateers are really very much willing to really enter to our countries and privatize. So the bottom line is we have to resist and continue fighting consistently against this water privatization. Provision of alternatives. I know Professor Emmanuel Obina is also here, part of this program, and you can see exactly what the success stories of some of the teachings you did in Africa were really following, and what to really train us and to fight against water privatization with alternatives of public-public partnership. And we are quickly going to Sister Dr. Everline Aketch, who is the PSI Sub-Regional Secretary in charge of English-speaking East and West Africa. Aketch is based in Uganda, where we, in those days, attempted to democratize the control of water resources with a very good eminent professor at the helm of affairs there. And she also has a lot of experience to share with us in Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda. and also the campaign train in Eastern Africa. So please, Sister Everline, the floor is yours. We have about 40 minutes, 20 minutes to go. So you have 10 minutes, and then we will take advantage of the remaining 10 minutes to really answer questions and attempt even responding to some of the questions that are going to be raised. So please, Everline, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much, Comrade Sani, and also thank you to all the previous presenters. I think I'll actually go under the 10 minutes because much of my submission has already been presented. Now, I just want to put a lot of spotlight on Kenya because the story of Tanzania is quite known. It could actually be a good model because when privatization was undertaken in 2004, shortly after only 1 year, the country decided to remunicipalize it as a result of the failure of the private sector to offer what they promised to offer in terms of access, in terms of water quality, which did not actually come to pass. So we have a good success story in terms of East Africa, which maybe others could learn from, but the success was as a result of the World Bank actually acknowledging.
There's a noise there somewhere.
Yeah, the success story was as a result of World Bank actually acknowledging that their previous push was not working. Now, coming to Kenya, we must appreciate that the wave of privatization across Africa, whether within the water sector or electricity, dates back to the 1980s and culminated in 1990s. Now, for Kenya, the first water reform was undertaken in 1999, and then in 2002, it was actualized, where water was removed from local authority to regional service water providers, who were first of all registered as public limited companies, but then eventually they brought on board a number of privateers. Now, Younoussa just said that the Kenyan Constitution recognizes water as a fundamental right. Yes, in paper, but in actual sense, it is not the case on the ground, because by the time they decided to privatize and make reforms in 2002, the national government decided to take its hands off the provision of public water to the people. Now, we see a number of private actors within the water sector, and many of them are actually charging a lot of fees. For instance, the statistic currently shows you that each household has to depart with about $4.5 per month to be able to access the piped water. On the other hand, if you look at the Kenyan population, which stands at 53 million, only 59% of them have got access to quality water. On the other hand, 41% to quality sanitation. So it shows you that the advent of privatization of water in Kenya was actually a very big mistake. Could the host kindly mute Sahin? Thank you so much. So we actually see that the advent of privatization in Kenya was actually more of a disservice to the people than actually what was actually intended to provide. Now, the biggest challenge facing the water sector in Kenya is the fragmentation. There's no clear law in terms of central management, because as I've already said, the national government decided to put its hands off the management of water. And currently, each of the regional governments, we refer to them in Kenya as county governments, decides to manage their own water, get their own private contractors to actually supply the water at a very high cost. And sometimes we've actually seen conflict between two counties which share the same water source. One threatening to actually block the source, another one saying, I'll take you to court. So there's a lot of confusion in terms of this. But you must also appreciate that the current confusion we are seeing is as a result of the push for structural adjustment programs by the likes of IMF and also World Bank. That notwithstanding, as PSI and the affiliates, what are the measures that we've actually undertaken to be able to discuss the current challenge of privatization, which is really making it difficult for many of the households to access quality and affordable clean water. In 2018, as PSI affiliates who were able to engage with a number of stakeholders within the water sector, both the service providers who come from the private sector and also the regulatory authority. And they were able to look at the reforms which were undertaken in 2002 to see what are the gaps. And one of the things that we proposed to the stakeholders was to consider the issue of public-public partnership. Our justification for this is that whether you want it or not, the bulk of expertise is actually found within the public sector workers. They are the ones who are trained. They know where the problem is. Then they know how to, improve the water access, which is, for me, is very important. We also talked about being able to review the current policy that is causing a lot of conflict among the county government workers. But more importantly, how does the Ministry of Water come on board to be able to regulate this and also rethink in terms of the national government putting budget allocation towards provision of water in the entire country. In 2021, one of the governors of Taita Taveta actually complained that the national government had actually said to take this kind of aloof stand in terms of providing water even to the most arid areas. So that shows you the magnitude of the challenge of water in this area. And as a result of privatization, the government feels they are not obligated to be part of this process, whereas the Constitution recognizes that water access is a fundamental right. Now, in terms of other campaigns, we were able to link up and have a coalition between PSI affiliates in Kenya and the community-based organizations, many of them coming from slums, which are some of the biggest slums in Africa, actually. And we were able to meet some of the officials of Ministry of Water, and mainly that was the chief secretary, assistant secretary, who is in charge of administration in water. And we were able to discuss the current challenges facing the community. Because as workers, we recognize one thing: we are part of the community even before we become the workers. So we had dialogue in terms of what are our provisions, what are our expectations, even if they're going to carry some bit of reform. In addition to that, we're able to meet with the various county governments. Those are the ones I've talked about in terms of the regional governments. We have about 47 of them. However, the affiliates were able to meet with about 4 of the county governments to be able to discuss how do we have the PUP, that is public-public partnership, in terms of provision of water in each of these counties. What do we mean by public-public partnership? Get, for instance, if Nairobi Water is doing a good job in terms of providing water for its citizens, can we have a county, for those ones who know Kenya, like Nakuru, link up so that they're able to share the expertise without getting the private actors on board? Because every time you contract me as a private actor, definitely I must factor my cost and my profits in terms of the tariffs I'm going to charge per 1 unit that a consumer or the customer is actually going to consume. So we were able to discuss this as alternatives, and we're still hoping that going into the future, we should be able to have the opportunity to explore what are those alternatives, because the current terrain of Kenya is actually quite bad. I want to give a brief in terms of Uganda, because Bode alluded to that. In Uganda, there was an attempt to privatize water in 2004 as a result of push by both IMF and also World Bank. However, through the help of Public Services International, and that is mainly David Boyce and Sani, the unions were able to interface not only with the ministry and also the president, but they're also able to get the Council of the Presidents of Africans to sign a letter requesting the government of Uganda not to privatize water. Now, interesting enough, when the push for privatization failed and the workers were given opportunity to provide the water themselves under the public provision, currently Uganda enjoys a big coverage in terms of water access, because when they're taking over, there were only about 25 towns, which were covered under the national umbrella. Currently, we're actually proud of about 258 towns in Uganda being covered by piped water against the 350. Now, this shows you clearly as a testament that if you leave the water provision in the hands of the public sector and also in the hands of the public workers, you are able to get better results compared to when you give it to the private actors. Just like the case of Tanzania showed it, and also currently just like the case in Kenya is actually showing that every time you have privateers putting their hands into provision of public services, the cost, affordability, quality is actually compromised. But finally, some of the things you can actually do in terms of fighting and also change the narrative. The government cannot get itself outside the business of a government, because one of the reasons why we elect governments is that they should be able to protect the interest of the citizens in terms of quality public service provision. We can also engage with IMF and also World Bank to actually put their hands off in terms of public service provision. We know that Bywater is one of the companies that is really interested and Swiss in privatization within East Africa, both in Kenya and also in Uganda. So we should be able to engage them at that level, including solidarities from some of our sister organizations to push them to get off our water. I beg to submit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Everline, for doing justice to this presentation. It's very good. You have really brought out some of the silent issues, especially in respect to public-public partnership, which actually was a baby in one way or the other of Dr. Emmanuel Levina. Professor Levina is here. And I remember about 10 to 15 years ago, he was in Nairobi to actually take us through this concept of public-public partnership. He was also in Nigeria. I remember he met Bode and some colleagues, and we went around the country actually preaching public-public partnership. Thank you, Everline. And well, comrades, you can also refer to the chat. And there's a point there highlighted by Sandra and climate change. And I also want to take this opportunity to invite all of you to COP27 in Egypt this year. So we can actually all assemble there and continue to advocate for the good things for our region, and both Africa and the Arab region. So thank you, Everline. We have 9 minutes to go. And I know probably Alassane and Vera will be itching to really make comments or ask questions, but I don't know how really we can manage the responses in the next 9 minutes. I am surprised. I know that certainly 2.5 hours will never be enough for this kind of presentation. So thank you very much, colleagues and comrades, for doing justice to all the topics given to each and every one of you. You cannot actually do better than what you have done. I really appreciate that as a facilitator, and I'm happy to be part of this conference. Alhassan and Vera, I want to hand over back to you so that you can make your remarks and also conclude.
Well, if we can take 1 or 2 questions, that will be fine. If people desperately need to ask a question.
Okay, okay. Comrades, please, you are familiar with the way we do this in this kind of program. So really, if you have your hand, if you want to ask a question or make comments or seek clarifications, feel free to do so. Raise your hand. Vera and Alassane will be there to see. And then, of course, if we do not have, I wanted to ask Bode, his engagement with the World Bank in Nigeria. I remember we were in Abuja having a summit when the World Bank invited them for a meeting where they tried to deny being part of the privatization process in Lagos. So if there's no question, please, Bode, you can respond to this probably in 2 minutes. Then I hand over finally to Alhassan and Vera.
Well, thanks, Comrade Sani.
But you are on mute.
Oh,
yeah, you know, you're fine now. Go ahead.
So I said, thanks so much. One aspect of our campaign has been the World Bank itself as a target. And we have done that by participating in the World Bank annual events. Like I was once in, I think, DC, that's where or was in New York, that the head office was, where I had to sit down with the whole of their regional heads that work on issues of water, and we made our points known. But at the country office in Nigeria was that they were initially reluctant to work with us. We written them series of, meet with us, not to actually work with us. So we written to them series of letters which they will not acknowledge. But I think it was the National Summit in Abuja in 2015, if I'm correct, comrades. We didn't know that they sent a mole to the meeting. And I think they were able to see the sheer scale of people's power, activists, both from Nigeria and beyond, that were in the room, and the quality of presentation and commitment of people. And I suddenly, while the meeting was going on, got a mail from the World Bank that we should meet with them. And then we picked a delegation to meet with them. And of course, we sat down in their office, canvassed our position, thoroughly presented our documents to them, and explained clearly to them why we are against water privatization in Nigeria. it's glad to know that why they did not come back to us in their annual report of, I think 2019, they eventually acknowledged that they were not able to go ahead with the water privatization in Lagos because of our activity. So it was clearly stated, though they didn't write to us, that they were not able to proceed then. But since that time also, I've neither invited us to their CSO, so-called CSO meetings, and we continue to send correspondences to them and also engage them at public spaces. We will continue to monitor the bank. We know for sure, again, that the IFC, which is their one of their arms, has also been meeting with the Lagos state government, trying to, again, market one thing or the other. So our responsibility is to continue to monitor the bank and to continue to call them to account and to explain to them the kind of development that we want for our people.
Yeah, thank you, Comrade Bode. Thank you very much.
So,
so Al-Hassan, over to you. I know you. Okay, Al-Hassan, over to you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Bode and Evelyn, and I mean, you guys, all the speakers, just been amazing. Vera, did you have a question before we wrap up?
Yes, actually. Can you see me? Yeah, perfect.
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to say, oh my God, all these presentations, they're so amazing and really inspiring, all the activism and so on, and all the knowledge which came here together today. I'm so glad that we recorded some of it and that we can re-listen and that other people can also listen to it. I have a very quick question, and that is that I recently in some research came across basically the remunicipalization of water in Algiers in Algeria. And I wanted to...
Vera, we're not getting very well.
Oh God, my mic is playing up. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, better, exactly.
Yeah, okay, I just tried to scream. Okay, so yeah, compliments to everybody for the great presentations. And then I just wanted to say, I recently came across in some research I did around the remunicipalization of water in Algeria. And I just wanted to see if anybody has heard anything about it, knows more about it, and maybe wants to collaborate to dig deeper into this case, or maybe someone has already done research on it. It would be great if this person, if you know anything about it, to get in touch with me. I just post some links here about some newspaper articles of what happened, and also my email address. So yeah, if you know anything, please get in touch. Thank you.
Yeah, we have Najwa here. Najwa is our sub-regional secretary in charge of Arab sub-region. She's here. Mansour Cheni from Tunisia is also here. So please, Najwa, if you have any information, you can share it. If you don't have, you have the email contacts of Al-Hassan and Vera. Please, you can get in touch with them, and then, of course, see what you can do. Najwa, are you with us?
Yes. Yes. Hello, Sani. Thank you.
Yes,
and thank you for all the...
Oh, unfortunately, your line is
water privatization, quality of water, etc. So yes, I will share my email with yes, Sarah. I will put it on the chat, and then I can send some information through email. Okay.
Good.
Thank you very much. All right, folks.
Fantastic. That's great.
Yeah, this has been an amazing session. It's challenged the morning and went ahead and had even more people than what we had in the morning. At a point, I counted 70 people. That's you've challenged the morning session. You've broken the record of the morning session. I promise you, the next session, which is on health at 2:30, would attempt to break your record on the water record.
Maybe.
Thank you so much, Comrade Sani, for chairing, and all the speakers with amazing presentation. And I know that we have recorded this. We would share the links when it's available, and people can re-listen, re-watch. And if you have questions, you can get in touch with the presenters, and then let's build the coalitions and the movements that have been kicked off, and let's support this great work. And see you in 30 minutes time, and it's on the same link. You don't need to sign in again. Just put your mic and video off, and then you come back in 30 minutes. And we have the water and the health session, which will be chaired by Professor Nana Equia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.